Picture a police officer walking a beat in London. Years on the force, steady, experienced. Base pay, somewhere around £40,000 a year, roughly $50,000. Now Madrid. A national police officer, maybe 25,000 to 30,000 euros a year. Mexico City. An officer patrolling a tough district, often earning the equivalent of 8 to 12,000 US dollars annually. Sometimes less. Warsaw. A Polish officer, perhaps $15,000 to $20,000. Bangkok. Lower still, a few $1,000s a year for a rank-and-file cop. Now fly to a city in California. Same uniform, same badge, same basic job. Keep the peace, answer the call. And that American officer, with overtime, can pull in well over $150,000 a year. In some departments, even the base salary alone clears 6 figures. Same job title, same duty. A paycheck from another planet. Here's the number that makes people stop. While officers across much of the world earn the equivalent of $10,000, $20,000, maybe $40,000 a year, many American police officers earn 6 figures, and in the highest-paying departments, total compensation with overtime can reach $200,000 or more, for a job that, in most states, doesn't require a college degree. To an officer in Warsaw or Manila, that figure sounds unreal. It's 3, 5, even 10 times what they take home for arguably more dangerous, more chaotic work. So how did this happen? How did America turn the local cop, a modestly paid public servant who worked everywhere else, into one of the best-paid policing jobs on the planet? That's exactly what we're answering today. Let's kill the easy answer first. It's not because American police work harder than everyone else. An officer in Mexico City or Sao Paulo faces staggering danger and pressure for a tiny fraction of the pay. Effort and risk don't explain it, if anything. Some of the lowest-paid police on Earth face the highest risk. It's not because they're better trained. In fact, American police training is often shorter than in much of Europe, where officers may train for 2 or 3 years. Higher pay, sometimes less training. So that's not it either. And it's not simply, America is rich, so everything pays more. Plenty of American public sector jobs, teachers are the classic example, pay modestly, sometimes below the global expectation once you adjust for cost of living. Policing is different. It pays unusually well for a public job with a low formal barrier to entry. So if it's not harder work, not more training, and not just a rich country lifting all boats, then something specific is going on. Something built into how America funds, organizes, and bargains for its police. So let's get into it. Start with something most people outside America never realize. The United States does not have a police force. It has thousands of them. Most countries run policing as a national or regional system, one or a few large forces, with pay set centrally by the government. America went the opposite way. Policing grew up locally, city by city, county by county, through the 1800s and into the 1900s. Today there are estimated to be around 18,000 separate law enforcement agencies in the US, each run by a city, county, or state, each setting its own budgets and its own pay. In the early decades, this job was not a path to wealth. Through much of the 20th century, being a cop was solidly working class, modest, stable, respectable, but not lucrative. It was often a job for people without a college degree, looking for security and a pension. But that fragmented, hyper-local structure, thousands of independent employers, planted a seed. Because when pay is set locally and police become organized, you don't get one negotiation. You get thousands of them, each pushing wages up in its own town. And then, in the mid-20th century, those negotiations got a powerful new weapon. Here's the force that changed everything: collective bargaining. Through the 1960s and 70s, police unions and associations grew strong across American cities. And unlike in many countries, these local unions could negotiate directly and aggressively with the city governments that employed them. Police unions became some of the most effective labor organizations in the country. They bargained not just for base salary, but for an entire structure of pay that quietly stacks up to enormous totals. Generous overtime rules, shift differentials, hazard and specialty pay, And crucially, pensions, retirement plans often far more generous than anything in the private sector. In many departments, an officer can retire after 20 or 25 years on a pension, worth a large share of their final salary, sometimes for life. Then there's overtime, the hidden engine. In a lot of American departments, total take-home pay isn't really about base salary. It's about overtime, and the numbers can be staggering. It's well documented that in some big city departments, individual officers have earned hundreds of thousands of dollars in a single year once overtime is stacked on, occasionally doubling their base pay. Court appearances, special events, chronic understaffing that forces existing officers to cover extra shifts. It all converts into overtime dollars. And there is a real staffing squeeze feeding this. Many U.S. departments report difficulty recruiting and retaining officers, with thousands of unfilled positions nationwide in recent years. Fewer officers covering the same work means more overtime for those who remain, which pushes individual paychecks even higher. The median police officer wage in the U.S. sits roughly in the $65,000 to $75,000 range, already high by world standards, but in high-cost, heavily unionized states like California, New Jersey, and New York, base pay plus overtime routinely launches officers well into six figures. So you have the formula: thousands of local employers, strong unions bargaining against each one, a pay structure loaded with overtime and pensions, and a staffing shortage that multiplies the overtime. That's the explosion. But why does it stay high? That's Act 3. Three locks hold these wages in place, and they're powerful. First, political leverage. Police unions are not just labor organizations, they're influential political players in local elections. They endorse mayors, fund campaigns, and shape the politics of the very city councils that set their budgets. A local politician who fights the police union risks both a tough re-election and the accusation of being soft on crime. So the pressure on city budgets bends, again and again, toward maintaining and raising police pay. Second, the public safety trump card. Public safety is the one service almost no community is willing to cut. When budgets tighten, cities/parks, libraries, road repair, long before they cut police. That protected status keeps the money flowing, even when other public salaries stagnate. Third, the local funding structure itself. Because police are paid out of city and county budgets, often funded heavily by local property taxes, wealthier American towns can, and do their officers a great deal, competing with neighboring towns for staff. This creates a bidding war, town by town, that ratchets pay upward across whole regions. Who benefits? The officers, clearly, especially those near retirement, with rich pensions and heavy overtime. The unions, whose strength is validated by every raise. And in a quieter way, local politicians who buy labor peace and a tough-on-crime image. Who pays? The local taxpayer, largely invisibly, through property taxes and city budgets, and through pension obligations that stretch decades into the future. Some American cities now spend enormous shares of their budgets on police salaries and retired officer pensions, costs that are extremely hard to ever roll back. Now zoom out, because the same job pays so differently elsewhere for clear reasons. In Europe, policing is usually national or regional, with pay set centrally by the government and standardized across the whole country. There's no town-by-town bidding war, no thousands of local unions, each pushing wages up against a separate city. A German or Spanish officer is paid on a national scale, often with strong benefits and job security, but without the explosive local overtime and pension stacking you see in high-cost US departments. The trade-off: more uniform, more stable, lower ceiling. In Latin America, like Mexico, police wages are low because overall wages are low. Public budgets are stretched, and there's a large supply of people willing to take the job, sometimes alongside serious problems of underfunding and corruption that low pay itself helps drive. In much of Asia, similar forces, lower overall wage levels, centralized pay, and an abundant labor pool keep salaries modest. Here's where I won't pretend one system is better. The American model produces some of the best paid officers on earth, but it also produces wild inequality between a rich suburb's force and a poor city's, and pension costs that can financially strangle a city for decades. The European model pays less but spreads it evenly, trains longer, and keeps costs predictable. A well-paid officer in California and a modestly paid, heavily trained officer in Norway are products of two completely different bargains about how a society funds safety. Neither is simply right. They're different answers to the question of who sets the price, a local union or a national government. Step back, and the police paycheck becomes a lesson about something much larger than policing. A salary, again, isn't really a reward for effort or danger. If it were, the most dangerous policing jobs on earth would be the best paid, and they're often the worst paid. A salary is the product of leverage. Who has the power to negotiate? Against whom? With how much political muscle behind them? American police pay is high not because the work is uniquely valuable, but because American officers happen to sit in an unusually powerful bargaining position. Organized, politically connected, funded locally, and protected by a public that won't cut safety. Change the leverage and you change the number. Strip out the local unions and pay flattens. Centralize the funding and the bidding war ends. Remove the overtime structure and six-figure paychecks shrink toward the base. The American cop earns what they earn because of where they stand in the system, far more than what they do on the street. So the next time you see a patrol car roll by, remember, you're not just looking at law enforcement. You're looking at one of the most successful long-running negotiations in American labor history, paid for, quietly, by every property tax bill in town. Now I want to hear from you. If you're an American officer, is the pay what people think it is, or is the base modest and the real money buried in overtime and years of sacrifice? Tell me what the paycheck actually looks like from the inside. If you're an officer outside America, in Europe, Latin America, Asia, what do you really earn? And does a six-figure American cop sound incredible to you, or does the rest of your system make up for it in security and training? And if you're thinking about entering law enforcement, drop your questions. There are officers in this comment section who'll give you the straight answer. Drop it all below. I read every comment and they shape where this series goes. Because this is one piece of a bigger series uncovering the hidden economics behind American jobs. Why some pay fortunes, why some don't, and what it really reveals about the country. Subscribe and come with me. See you in the next one.